It all started innocently enough. I had always been a dreamer, someone who longed for a place to call my own, a home where I could plant roots and build a life. After years of working relentlessly, saving every penny, and sacrificing so much, I finally found the house I had always envisioned. It wasn't much, just a modest 3-bedroom on a quiet street, nestled in a picturesque suburban neighborhood. The houses were all lined up neatly with perfectly trimmed lawns, tall trees lining the streets, and that tranquil feeling you get when you're in a place that feels safe. It was everything I had imagined. It felt like a fresh start. It felt like home. At first, the community seemed perfect. The neighbors were friendly and the houses looked like something out of a catalog. Everyone greeted each other with smiles, and the local homeowners association, HOA, was a tight-knit group focused on keeping the area looking pristine. They monitored the gardens, lawns, and the condition of every fence. It was their way of making sure that no one stepped out of line. Most of the time, that wasn't an issue. I never gave it a second thought. The HOA was just a group of people doing their job, maintaining the standard of the neighborhood. Little did I know that in the midst of all this perfection, one woman, a seemingly harmless presence, was about to turn my life upside down. Karen was the president of the HOA, and it didn't take long before I learned that she wasn't just any president. She had a sense of power over the neighborhood that no one could challenge. She had an almost obsessive control over every little detail of our community, and she used that power ruthlessly. I first encountered her when I decided to build a new fence. It was a simple project, just replacing an old wooden fence with something a little more modern. The design was simple, and the height was barely above average. Yet Karen somehow found a way to make it an issue. She claimed the fence violated the HOA guidelines, even though no one else seemed to care. I thought it was a misunderstanding, and I tried to explain that it wasn't that big of a deal. After all, I had spent my entire life working to afford a place where I could make my own decisions. But Karen wouldn't back down. She came at me with violation notices, citing all kinds of obscure HOA rules I had never even heard of. She sent me one after another, each more ridiculous than the last. The color of my mailbox wasn't up to standard. My grass was a shade too long. My car, which was parked in my own driveway, wasn't in line with some arbitrary rule about driveway aesthetics. The list went on, each note more petty and vindictive than the last. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking that surely this would blow over. But Karen wasn't the type to let things go. The more I resisted, the more she dug in. It became a battle of wills, and in the end, she was winning. Soon, the stress of living under her watchful eye started to wear me down. My life, which had once been so peaceful, was now filled with constant anxiety. Every time I parked my car, I'd worry it wasn't parked just right. Every time I watered my lawn, I'd second-guess myself, wondering if I was following some unspoken rule I had yet to learn. It wasn't long before I started to dread even walking out my front door, knowing I would have to face her and her judgmental glare. The once idyllic neighborhood felt suffocating, but that was just the beginning. As if the constant harassment wasn't enough, something far more sinister was brewing. Karen wasn't content to simply make my life difficult. She was determined to destroy it. One morning, I woke up to a sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The sound of sirens, the smell of smoke. I rushed outside, my heart sinking into my stomach as I saw the flickering glow on the horizon. My house, the home I had worked so hard for, was on fire. I ran toward the blaze, my feet barely touching the ground, but the fire was already too far gone. The flames were raging, devouring everything in their path, licking at the walls and windows with an insatiable hunger. I watched in horror as the firefighters struggled to contain the fire, but it was futile. My home, my safe haven, was burning to the ground. It was over. The fire department did their best to investigate, but the damage had already been done. It wasn't until later that the truth started to emerge. The authorities found evidence of arson, accelerants that pointed to foul play. The evidence eventually led to one undeniable conclusion. Karen had done this. She had burned my house down, taking everything I had worked for in a single, horrific act. It was unimaginable. How could someone do something so evil? How could someone destroy another person's life out of spite? The police arrested her, but that didn't change what had happened. As the investigation progressed, I was left in a state of shock. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? But it wasn't long before I was faced with an even bigger shock. The day of Karen's sentencing arrived, and she showed up in the courtroom, sitting there, smug and unapologetic. I could hardly believe my eyes. There she was, the woman who had destroyed my life, sitting there in front of me as if nothing had happened. Her face was the same as it had always been, cold, calculating, with no sign of remorse. I couldn't understand it. How could she act this way? How could she be so heartless? I was shaking with anger, every muscle in my body tense as I tried to hold back the tears. I wanted justice. I wanted her to pay for what she had done, but the moment that followed was the one that would change everything. As the judge read out her sentence, Karen's stoic facade finally cracked. She broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. The woman who had destroyed my home, who had driven me to the brink of despair, was suddenly a broken, vulnerable person. In that moment, something unexpected happened. I saw her, not as the villain in this story, but as a person who had been consumed by her own demons. The courtroom fell silent as she wept, and I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me. Anger, yes, but also sadness. Sadness for the woman who had caused so much pain in her life that she felt this was the only way to cope. She was broken, just like me. The judge imposed her sentence and Karen was led away, but I couldn't help but feel differently. I had wanted revenge, to see her suffer as much as I had. But now, I wasn't so sure. The woman I had once hated was now a human being in my eyes. Her pain was real. It didn't erase what she had done, but it made me realize that holding on to my anger would only keep me trapped in a cycle of misery. I didn't want to see her suffer anymore. I wanted peace, not just for myself, but for her as well. What happened to me had been tragic, but it didn't have to define my life forever. I could let go of the pain. I could heal. I didn't need revenge. I needed closure. I needed to move on. This story is fictional and shared only to teach a moral lesson. In life, it's not about the obstacles we face, it's about how we choose to face them.